Okay. Aha. Well, maybe this is fine. Okay, let me get a nice little background image while I yap to you about the Battleland. I think there's some images on here. Oh my god, computers are so complicated, man. Just show me the file. Oh, it's a WebP. Okay. Showed up for a second. Aha, there we go. All right, we're making progress. Now let's get this a little bit more visible. All right. Wait, maybe actually I should just. What my room? Yeah, my room is not. Okay, now let's put a little blur on this. Okay. Okay, this seems good. Okay, now am I going to need some visual aids? Maybe, but I think not really, no. I'll be mostly talking about what happened. Yeah, let me just open up my notes. Oh, actually I should have the gem pulled up. That would be very useful. Okay. What's poppin', gamers? So, you might have noticed that I've been gone for a long ass time. Like 3 or 4 weeks, I think. It's been a while. And the reason I haven't been streaming and reviewing games and doing all of that nice stuff that I usually do is because I've been traveling. I was visiting my family in Asia, and while I was there, I dropped by the Battle Hardened. But let's start at the beginning. So, uh, me and my family, when they came over for Christmas, we were basically setting up like this little visit, like you guys live pretty far away. I actually have some time at the start of the year where that I can take to go visit. And my mom, God bless her heart, she was like, "Oh, but if you're coming over to visit, you can't just stay with us in Macau the whole time. We have to like go somewhere else. We need to like see different places, travel to a different country." And I'm a pretty low energy guy. I don't like traveling like especially that much. But she was really psyched about it. And she was asking me where I wanted to go. And so I was like, okay, let me, I open FabTCG. I go, what events are happening the weekend of whatever. And I find that Battle Hardened Bangkok is going on. And I've wanted to visit Thailand for a long time. So it's just a match made in heaven. Everything was awesome. So I go on my trip to Macau. I stay there for a week, working remotely with my parents. And then the next week we go on vacation to Thailand. We went to a place called Ayutthaya. Let me show you that. Ayutthaya. I went to this place, which was really, really cool. So it had all of these like ruins. It had where's the guy? It had this guy. It's like a Buddha face, trapped within the roots of a tree. It was awesome. This place was very, very, very cool. And after that was the first stop on our trip, and then we went on to Bangkok. And in Bangkok, we also visited like all of the temples. We saw a bunch of really, really beautiful stuff. The food was also amazing, by the way. I ate immensely. I'm sure I gained a few kilos during that trip. And on the last day of the trip, I had Battle Hardened in Bangkok. So, Battle Hardens, there's 3 events. There's Super Armory the day before, there's the Battle Hardened on the Saturday, and then you have the ProQuest Plus on the Sunday. I'm only going to the Battle Hardened, so it was my only only event that I was going to. And I talk about this on stream sometimes, so you might know, but the deck that I've been playing lately is Nu, Count Your Blessings Nu. And the timeline here is so that I leave Portugal before the Hunted comes out or the Hunted pre-release even happens. So there's no way for me to get cards in Portugal with my community. So my idea was that, okay, let's see, like when the Hunted drops, let's see what cards are available. I'm departing before there's even like the complete spoilers coming out, right? So I don't even know if there's anything that I would want to include in my deck when I'm leaving the country. So the Hunted comes out, turns out insane set. There's a lot of cards that I would have liked to have, but the reality is that it's going to be very hard for me to get the cards for the Battle Hardened. In Macau, there's not a Flesh and Blood scene, as far as I could tell. I looked at like the local TCG shops. I don't think any of them carried Flesh and Blood right now. However, Hong Kong has a pretty big Flesh and Blood scene, as I'm sure you know. Some of the strongest players, Pudding Tam, and Lao, Ching Sang, of those guys, Blue Pitch, are from Hong Kong. So I was hoping, okay, Hong Kong is a very active community. Surely they're going to have like 1 million pre-release events. What I'll do is maybe I'll set aside one day from my week in Macau. I'll go through a bunch of pre-releases for the Hunted, and I will try to get some cards, like get something that I could use for my deck. So I leave Portugal I think it's the spoilers for all the commons and rares and majestics are coming out as I'm flying from Portugal to Macau. And I see this little card. Let me show you. I find a cheeky little card called, I'm sure you're familiar with her. Shelter from the Storm. So, this card, defense reaction, 044. Discard this, the next 3 times you'd be dealt damage this turn, prevent 1 of that damage. This card is insane, right? This card is extremely strong. The reasons why this card is strong are, you know, it's almost limitless, but just to give you a brief overview, this card is a 044 defense reaction, which we haven't had in a while, or at least a really strong generic one. You know, we have Fate, we have Sink Below, those are some of the best cards in the game. They get played in a bunch of different decks. This is like in contention to be as good as Sink Below, is my current opinion on this card. The reason why it's so good is because this effect lets you prevent damage in decks that are very hard to prevent damage from. So if you'll think about my ramblings that I usually do on stream, I talk a lot about how one of the benefits of Zen, that Zen has, is that the weapon is very hard to fully prevent the damage from. Right? It goes for 2, and then it's a dagger for 1. It's very hard to interact with this damage. It's hard to block this efficiently. Shelter from the Storm helps you interact with all of these kinds of hard to block damage that a lot of decks do. So, if you're playing a fatigue deck, like I am, well, not directly fatigue, but a control deck like Count Your Blessings New, this kind of card is very good because these little damage pings are one of the ways that people can get your life down very effectively, right? If they just keep pinging you, you know, Count Your Blessings is going to smooth over a lot of that damage that you take, but this is just another tool for you to interact with those decks that have some game into you, right? So I was really hoping to get this card. So the week I arrive in Macau, the week goes by, and the Friday of the pre-releases is arriving. And so a couple days before, I basically go on Facebook, I look at the Hong Kong Flesh and Blood community, I ask, hey, you know, where are the pre-releases? A lot of the shops and shop information was in Chinese, so it was pretty hard for me to navigate. But, you know, some people reached out, they were very nice to me, they explained, like, these are the events that are going to go down, these are the shops, you know, go ahead and sign up. So I try to find the sign up links, and I find a couple, and I'm like, oh, these are sold out. It's like a few days before the pre-release still, and they're already sold out. And as soon as I realize that the pre-releases are selling out, I go into like panic mode, and I'm like, oh, I might not be able to go to any pre-release, which would be disastrous, obviously, because, you know, there's not only this angle of, oh, I really want to open Shelter, I also just want to go to the pre-releases, right? The pre-releases, they're super fun. They're some of my favorite events to go to. You get to meet the people in a more casual setting, which I would really also like to just meet the players in Hong Kong. I think that would be a great time. And so I start going into panic mode, and I start emailing all the shops like, hey, do you guys still have slots? Can I join your pre-release? Can I sign up? And, you know, a couple of days go by, and I keep getting these emails saying the pre-release is full, sorry. Yeah, so basically I was just, I just messed up. I was too late on it. The pre-releases filled up really, really quickly. It's very different in Hong Kong than it is from Portugal. In Portugal, you know, some pre-releases will fill up, but it's not like 3 days before the pre-release. That stuff almost never happens here, at least in the region where I play. So, first Flesh and Blood interaction of the trip, I tried to go to the Hong Kong pre-releases for the Hunted. I can't go to any of them. They're all filled up. So we're not off to the best start. Next thing that happens is we're flying to Bangkok, right? And as we're flying to Bangkok, I'm talking with my testing team. They've been playing a lot. They're actually like pretty... they stay up until pretty late, so we can actually communicate, even though there's like a 8-hour time zone difference. We can actually still communicate. We can practice together. So my testing is going like fine. I'm playing basically exactly the same deck. My Count Your Blessings New version from Rosetta. And the testing isn't going super great. If you'll remember, before, you know, at the initial part of the Hunted, like spoiler season, there was this very, 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 very strong deck, which was 9 up, 6 and run Zephyr Needle Ira. And I was testing against this deck, and this deck was a little crazy. The numbers on this deck were really, really insane. So if you don't know, the idea is that you play up 6 and run, which lets you retrieve a dagger, and you play Zephyr Needle. And as Ira, you have the option of swinging Zephyr Needle for 2 and then for 3 with a blue, and then you have 1 floating. You can use flick knives to break the daggers. The Zephyr Needles also break just in of themselves. And so with the new retrieve mechanic, I mentioned specifically up 6 and run, but it's actually more about this retrieve mechanic in general. Ira is basically able to consistently recycle Zephyr Needles, and it was just like, the numbers on this deck were so bonkers. I think We Make Best has a video where they make a tier list before the Hunted came out, where they talk about this deck for a bit. I recommend you watch it. This deck was really, really strong. It was very hard to beat. I'm also having some games against Syndra, where I'm getting a little cooked. You know, our testing group, we didn't arrive at the Syndra version that ended up having a lot of success at calling Memphis, but it was pretty clear that Syndra was basically like this hyper-consistent aggro deck, which is more resistant to disruption than most aggro decks. So, let me tell you a little bit about how I feel about my deck, which is Country Blessings new, into Ira, into these aggressive strategies. Generally, what you're trying to do, I found, is that you're trying to stack disruption against the aggro deck. So what I mean by stacking disruption is you want to play as many disruptive pieces as you can every single turn. I feel like before, during MST, where, you know, original Zen MST was more of a combo deck, and so you needed to play at least 1 disruption every single turn. That was the strategy. Now that I'm playing Country Blessings new, into these aggressive strategies, I'm liking the stacking disruption on a single turn, because that way you accomplish a few things. You do a lot of damage, and also it is easier for you to use your leftover pitch to resolve Country Blessings. This is something that when Enigma Country Blessings won Worlds, this was a discussion point for a bit. Country Blessings is you know, theoretically the numbers on the card aren't that great. The card only really becomes very powerful if you're able to use the leftover pitch to do other things. And so what ends up happening, ironically, is that even though Country Blessings new, you'll think of it as this, you know, fatigue deck, control, very defensive. You're actually wanting to play very aggressively a lot of the time, is my experience, because you want to have leftover pitch. The way that you're most likely to have leftover pitch is because you're attacking with daggers or playing attack reactions. And so what ends up happening is you play very aggressively and you resolve your Country Blessings as you're attacking the opponent. So, and this strategy against, for example, Zen, I found worked extremely well. So my experience with Zen was, you know, at the start when the first new wave Zen decks came out, I was having a bit of trouble with them, but as I played more and more and more, the matchup kept getting more consistent. I figured out the strategy of, you know, playing pretty aggressively, stacking disruption. And Zen, he is very powerful and he can, you know, the hero ability is very strong. You can get the best card in your deck every single turn that you have chi. But one of the weaknesses of the deck is that it has a lot of... it doesn't have a lot, but it has a few requirements, you know? Every turn, Zen wants a couple things to happen. And so if you're stacking Disruption and you keep fiddling with their hand and their arsenal, there's a pretty good chance that you can just force them to have very ineffective turns. If you do something like get a chi out of their hand, that might be their search for the turn, and now the turn doesn't really flow as well as it should. If you Silence Call something also, if you Weakest Link, Surgical Extraction, Mask, all of this stuff can really clog up Zen, right? What I found playing against the hunted aggro decks, I'm going to include Fang here because I think you run into a similar issue, is that Syndra and Fang have a lot of redundancy, right? If you pick a card out of their hand, they can just use all the other cards in their hand to do exactly the same thing, because the deck is very homogeneous, let's call it that. And so as I'm testing, you know, I'm winning a lot of these games, but I'm not feeling amazing about these new wave matchups because about these new The Hunted matchups, because I feel like these redundant decks actually have pretty good game into Counter Blessings new. So, going into the Battle Hardened, one more important thing to mention is that I practiced very little against Arachne Marionette. So, that deck was pretty complicated. I was pretty sure that, it's the first weekend after the Hunted comes out that I'm playing this Battle Hardened. And so what I'm expecting is a lot of people will be on the new hotness aggro deck, which is Syndra. And so I'm preparing mostly against Syndra. And Arachne Marionette, my hope here is basically that this deck seems very complicated, very hard to pilot, very hard to build. Even if I play against some Arachne Marionette, it will probably be a very unrefined version that I'll be able to just kind of better deck them. So my deck is like, I have a lot of hours on it, it's very refined, I know I'm very comfortable with how I should play it. If I see someone on Arachne, even if the deck is powerful, even if they're a good player, they probably aren't on the same level of polish on that deck as I am on my deck. And that's kind of what I'm hoping will happen against Arachne. Also, the people in my testing group, like, they were testing Arachne, but not to the same extent that they were testing the Draconic heroes. So, this is kind of like the gist of my preparation. First thing that happened, I tried to go to pre-releases, I couldn't get any cards. Second thing that happened, I prepared a lot against the Draconic heroes, and I'm winning, a few games, but I'm not feeling great about my preparation into them. So, we get to the day before the Battle Hardened, so the Super Armory. I'm not playing in the Super Armory, but I arrive at the venue basically as the event is ending, because I want to talk to the tournament organizer, I want to just, meet the people, see the venue, just so I can be comfortable on the day that I'm actually playing. I get there, I meet the event organizer, he was super nice, lovely guy. I chat with him a bit about, how are you feeling, are you excited? He was super excited, super stoked. It was the first, big event that his store got. And, it was just a great guy. I talked with him a bit, and I see he has 3... Where are they? He has 3 shelters for sale. 3 of this guy. He has them on the table, laid out for anyone to buy. And I'm like, damn. I would really love these shelters. Because I'm having trouble with these Draconic heroes. Against Fang, this card is pretty good just because it's a defense reaction. Against Syndra, this card is good because it blocks Flick Knives. It stops this really annoying Flick Knives Mask of Momentum line that Syndra players love using. I would really love to have this card. And so I asked him, how much are the shelters? How much for the shelter? And he's like, $120. And I'm like, oh! Jesus Christ, it felt like a dagger in my heart. I love winning, I'm a pretty competitive guy, but I couldn't afford spending like $400 on 3 cards for the Battle Hardened. It was just too much. But yeah, so I'm officially, I talked with him about this. I also asked him if he has some other singles, because I'm trying to make some adjustments to my deck. And I'm basically coming to the final version of my deck during this discussion with this guy. And what I've arrived at is that I'm changing basically nothing. The only thing that I'm adding into my deck is this guy. Not this guy. Yeah, the only thing I'm adding into my deck is That All You Got. I brought a packages of cards that, I thought that I might want to include in my deck when I left Portugal. I thought this was pretty good against the Syndra, little attacks that she does with the kunais and stuff. Not as good into Fang, but I thought this might be relevant. So I brewed 3 copies of this in my deck, and that was basically all my changes. So, to recap, I'm going into the Battle Hardened with a deck that I had from Rosetta, and 3 extra copies of That All You Got that I added last minute because it seemed good. Now, we get to the morning of the Battle Hardened, and I actually took a lot of notes. So I can tell you about all of my opponents and how they played. So I get there, I'm pretty careful, I think this is something that a lot of people don't do, or they don't give it as much importance as I do. But, you know, the day before these big events, I always, like, get a good night's sleep. I always make sure I don't eat anything weird. I wake up early, so I get to, like, take a shower, you know, trim my beard, just feel good in general about the day coming up. And so I get there, and, you know, as I try to do, I feel pretty good. I'm like, I slept well, I'm hydrated, I know where I'm going to get food during the breaks, I have a lot of water with me, I'm feeling awesome. My first opponent was a Viserai turtle deck. Which, you know, Viserai turtle deck is not super strong right now, but it is a scary deck to play against, in my opinion. I'm always scared when I play against Turtle Viserai. I also have, in my community, for some reason, there's like a long, storied tapestry of Viserai Turtle. Like a lot of, we had a player for a while that was just on Turtle Viserai, that was his deck. And now we have a Viserai player that sometimes is playing the Turtle variant. So I have a lot of experience against it. And I have a lot of experience losing against it, if I'm being honest. Since I'm usually playing Assassin and Warrior, these decks that have some trouble like going over the top to kill the Viserai in time, I just lose to this deck a lot. I feel like it's not a great matchup for the decks that I usually play, and importantly, I've never played Counter Blessings New into Turtle Viserai. So I'm kind of just winging it. And you'll see that this is a pattern for most of the tournament. Like, during a lot of the tournament, I'm just winging it. Like, I'm on a deck that I'm pretty comfortable on, which is why I brought it, by the way. When I was in Portugal, I was making the decision like, oh, should I take a bunch of decks and like make a decision there? I was like, what I ended up deciding was I have like 100 hours in this Counter Blessings New deck. If there's any deck that is going to get me there on a fresh meta, where I'm going to, you know, surely meet a lot of variants and things I wasn't expecting, it's the deck that I've been playing a lot. So I just took Counter Blessings New, and I feel like that was a great choice because I had to... basically, I think familiarity and being comfortable on my deck was what got me through a lot of matches. So, this first game against Viserai Turtle, as soon as I realized that it's Turtle, I'm a little scared, but I also noticed that my opponent must be a new player or maybe a returning player because they don't have a complete deck. They're playing Iron Rot Boots, they're playing Vexing Quill Hand, which I don't think is what these Viserai lists usually play, and they're playing Arcanite Skullcap. So the equipment suit isn't complete. Opponent, I think, made a few mistakes. I also made a few mistakes, like, I'm telling you how I play against this deck so much, but I just forgot that Arcanite Ascendancy is a card, and I just didn't arsenal a defense reaction, so there was this turn where it was Arcanite Ascendancy with Slogism, so I think it goes for like 11 with 22 Rune Chants, and you know, I block some Rune Chants and I block 3, and he makes 8 more Rune Chants, which is not what you want to have happen when they play Arcanite Ascendancy. But ultimately, I got some pretty insane draws this game. Like, I had Natural, Prognosis, just a nick. I found all of my Counter Blessings very early, so I resolved a lot of life gain, I put on a lot of pressure, and I ended up fatiguing them. We got our first win. We're 1-0 today. Second round was against a guy named Eric. Eric was a French-Vietnamese player living in Vietnam, and he was on Ira Flickknife. So the version that I told you that I was pretty scared about because the deck was insane. But this is after the Zephyr Needle ban, so we're fighting Ira Flickknives, Kodashis, okay, which is a way more toned down version of the deck. Still, I think that this matchup is pretty high variance, is my impression right now. I haven't played it much, I'll be honest with you. But I feel like compared to the traditional Ira lists, this is a better matchup. The original Ira list, you have a lot of issues because they play a million defense reactions, they have a very good weapon in Kodashi. They're just playing... like good numbers at you the whole time. If you disrupt them, a lot of times it doesn't matter. So I think new Counter Blessings into regular Ira, very hard. New Counter Blessings into Ira Flickknives, she doesn't block as well. She's a bit more disruptible, like there are relevant cards for you to get out of their hand. And so I felt okay going into the match. Another very relevant thing here is that the night before I was texting my team like, look, this Zephyr Needle got banned, this is great, but if I face this Ira deck, how should I play into it? How should I sideboard? All of that stuff. And I discussed it a bit with them. And I think that was very useful because, you know, I went into the game. Even if my plan wasn't perfect, I had a plan. I was comfortable. I knew what I wanted to do. My opponent started insanely strong. Like, the initial hands were very brutal. There was this double savor the... oh, what is that card called? Let me check. It's the new dagger +4. Yeah, my opponent had a double savor bloodshed turn where with a Kodashi for like 10, which was pretty scary. Also just resolved like a lot of very good reds early on. And that was pretty hard to deal with, but, you know, we just, we held strong, we took some damage, we blocked what we could, and we're just trying to hold on. In the mid game, my opponent goes for this line where they go dagger, dagger again, flick knives, and they play the go again attack with retrieve, and they forget to get the dagger. I also, they forget to break the combat chain so that they can retrieve the dagger, right? Or something like that. They forget to retrieve the dagger at some point, and we go to my turn, and I'm playing the turn. I play out my turn, and then we go back to his turn, and I'm looking at the board set, I'm like taking stock of the situation, I'm pretty low at this point, but I realize that there's a dagger missing. Like, at some point, my opponent forgot to retrieve a dagger, and I'm like, ooh, this might be my way out here, actually. So, my opponent, I think, also didn't notice, I didn't notice. I think if he would have, if we had noticed at the time and he would have asked me to like take it back, obviously I would have let him. But he didn't ask, we just kept playing. And it ends up being that he has to take like 2 or 3 turns before he's able to get the dagger back. This gives me a lot of space to like resolve some counter blessings, put the pressure back on, and I end up winning the game in fatigue. So, me and my opponent start talking after the game. It's lunchtime now, so we end up going to lunch together, and yeah, we chat it up. We bond over this situation with the daggers. Where a couple turns later, my opponent also realized like, damn, I forgot to retrieve my dagger. My opponent was like a really cool guy. It was just a great time playing with them. They were very fun. We also had, during lunch, we also like kept chatting. They were very pleasant. It was a great time. I think it's a little scary when you go to these events sometimes that I didn't know anyone. I was just, all I have is a deck that is largely hated and my charming personality. That's all I have to get me through this day. So it was nice. Like, Eric was very pleasant. He was great to play with. He was great to have lunch with. I also forgot to mention that before the event started, as I'm filling out my deck list, I meet these two guys, Carlo and Jiggy. And they're from Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken. I want to double check this. I don't want to get their nationality wrong. They're from the Philippines. Okay. Yeah, so I meet Carlo and Jiggy from the Philippines. They were very sweet. Like, on this day, I ran out of mobile data on my phone. So I couldn't, like, talk with my family or anything. They were, doing other vacation stuff while I was at the event. And they were very nice. They would let me, they let me hotspot from their phone. I would check in with them after every round, seeing how they were doing. Carlo actually also ended up making top 8 on Aurora, like me. He's got a video about that I'll link in the description. But yeah, everyone was super nice, super friendly. Carlo and Jiggy, they were very, very friendly. They were very nice. Eric, also very friendly, very nice. I had a great time playing with all of these people. So, we go for lunch. It was a 20-minute lunch, which you know what that means. We went to McDonald's. McDonald's is like... It's like a sponsored battle-hardened food, in my opinion, because a lot of times the lunch break is very quick, and you need to get a quick food. And, McDonald's is... If they're anything, they're quick. So, we go to lunch. I arrive at my round 3 a little bit late. And I matched into Florian, a player named... let me check. Yeah. So I come back from lunch, I'm a little bit late, and I paired into a Japanese player called Yasuda. And Yasuda was on Florian. Yasuda, I was just saying how Eric was like such a nice guy. Yasuda was a blast to play with. This guy was very nice and very funny. um, Yasuda would do this very funny thing where, you've played against Assassin, you know how it goes. Sometimes you like play a sequence of cards that's just a complete blowout. And Yasuda would do this very funny thing where, when I Siren's Call, after he has full blocked my disruption, he would go, oh, and then he would start like monologuing in Japanese. He was very funny, very charming. I also had a great time playing with Yasuda. And we also ended up playing like a really, really tense and complicated game. So, Count Your Blessings New versus Florian is a matchup that I have some experience in. I had this local that brought Florian a couple times, and so I have some plan of what I wanted to do. But the conclusion that I was reaching in the new Florian matchup is that if the Florian player has like complete understanding of how they should play the matchup and they play it like very clean, I think I just end up losing. Like they have too much damage. Is my well, not too much damage, but they have very good card count cards. You have like the Fellings, you have a bunch of Guardian-esque attacks. You also have like the insane value engine in the endgame of Grasp, Reaping Blade. You have Reaping Blade, which is, it forces the Counter Blessings player to completely like rewire how they approach the matchup. So I was a little concerned about this, but I also had some experience, and I was hoping that my opponent didn't have a lot of experience in this matchup, and that would be what would get me over the edge. Again, we're going back to this theme of, I think my advantage in this event was I'm on a deck I'm very comfortable with, on matchups that I'm very comfortable with, and my opponent isn't always on that same page. So my opponent ended up having a pretty slow start to the game. Like, I got a lot of pressure early, I got to resolve a lot of disruption, get a lot of cards out of their hand all the time. I have a question. Do all high-level players have a large inventory and build their deck based on their upcoming matchup? I think so, yes. So if you're asking if all high-level players will always bring 80 cards to an event so that they can tune for the matchup that they're facing, the answer is yes, almost every time. There's this very funny story from Majin Bay, who is a wizard player, where because Kano is a more combo-y deck that wants to do what he wants to do, basically regardless of the opponent. And so Majin Bay basically had a tight 60 cards that he wanted to play into every matchup, and then he just put like funny cards as the rest of his inventory. So I guess technically not. That's not how high-level players do it, but most of the time you want to have like 80 cards, and you want every card that you present to be... It's in there for a reason, right? I'll probably go over my deck when I'm done telling the story, and I can tell you why every card is included and what matchups do I want to bring it in. I think that will give you a great edge against, other players. Like, being prepared for as many matchups as possible, I think, is key to doing well at these events. So, I was telling you, at the beginning of the game, my opponent has a very slow start. I get to put on a lot of pressure, get a lot of cards out of their hand. Every time that they're attacking me, I'm just taking all the damage because I want to be lower life so that I can resolve all my counter blessings through Reaping Blade. And then in the mid game, we hit a pivot point, as you do against Florian, where, Florian is just, he's online, so Reaping Blade, Grasp is making 2 rune chants, he's just shooting me with Fellings every single turn. There's Malefic Incantations on the board that are making a trillion rune chants. I'm taking a lot of damage, it's very hard to keep up with him. And I'm basically forced to just turtle for a big period in the mid game. I end up resolving 5 counter blessings, and I survive all of this. I survive the onslaught, basically. Like, I survive all the Malefic Incantations, all the Felling of the Crowns. There's another card that's very annoying. I'm forgetting it, but it's fine. I basically survive all the key threats, and my opponent is relying as basically whittled down to grasp Reaping Blade as often as they can, so they can get cards out of my hand and reduce my life total. But I'm holding on, and then at the end of the game, there's this moment where they're clearly running out of threats, but I go through their discard and they're banished. I'm like, there's still like a Felling of the Crown left to resolve, and so I find this line through with Siren's Call where basically I'm able to. I look at their hand, and it has, I believe, Felling, a blue, and Germinate. I think that was the hand. And I hit this sequence of disruption where I'm able to, I am able to dismantle this hand with getting rid of the. I think I get rid of the blue using Siren's Call, and then I have an on it that gets rid of Felling, and so Germinate ends up going in the arsenal. And then I have this sequence of threats because I pitch deck like Codex into a bunch of evil threats, where I'm able to basically stick this Germinate in the arsenal for like 2 or 3 turns, and I'm just like ripping the hand apart every single turn. And then we get to this situation in the end where the opponent finally gets a time to play. They resolve Germinate for 12, making 24 rune chants or whatever it is. I'm ahead on life. I park my last counter blessings in the arsenal. They attack me, all the rune chants go off. I take enough life to go below their health. I resolve the counter blessings, and then I'm able to survive the attack, and my opponent ends up getting fatigued and conceding. But this was a very, very tense game. Like, all the games up until now, I think, went into time. So this is also an important angle of playing Counter Blessings new, is that you have to be prepared to go into time basically every round. And you also have to be prepared to rely on the goodwill of your opponent, because a lot of games will, like, you will need to communicate with them, like, look, we need to play quickly because my deck takes a long time, we need to go fast. And you'll, in a lot of cases, I think you'll need them to concede, right? Because you get to these end games that are very, very complicated. So even if you guys both played fast and no one did any sloping or anything like that, even if both people play at a good pace, you will get to these situations in the end game where there is a critical decision to be made and there's 5 minutes left on the clock, and you will go to time, basically, because your opponent is forced to choose between throwing the game by messing up a decision or making the correct decision and taking a bit longer. And so a lot of times you will go to time, and you need your opponent to be like conscious of the fact that, am I getting fatigued? Am I not? Should I concede here? There's this very weird like social dynamic to playing Counter Blessings new. But if that's the deck that you want to play, as it was for my case, you kind of just have to deal with it. If you're bringing this very slow deck and you're facing your opponent, you're presenting your opponent with really hard decisions, you need to be prepared for them to say, like, basically, I don't concede when they go in time, and that's okay. Like, so that's totally in their right to do. You shouldn't pressure your opponents or anything like that. It's just something that happened. So he was a great guy. I think when we go to time, he's still in the game, but realistically, I think he only has like 2 blues left in the deck. I still have like a bunch of cards and a bunch of health, and he kindly concedes the game, which I was very thankful for. Okay, next round. Next round was very funny. I play against this guy called Pang. Pang was on Enigma, and I have. It was one of those games where basically you lost. I lost on turn 0. It wasn't even turn 1, it was turn 0. Basically, we roll the dice, and my opponent wins the dice roll, and they're like, I will go first. And I'm like, yep, that checks out. And whenever Enigma goes first, I'm basically sitting there like, please, 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 please don't kill me. And so, we're going through the game, we're going through the turn, and he's really thinking. It's turn 0. So I have no available actions. I'm just looking at him. And he's taking a long time. And I'm like, Enigma taking a long time on turn 0. This is either great news or terrible news. And so let me pull up the picture. I took a picture of what the turn 0 was like because it was so funny. Okay, let me see if I can find it. Okay, I found it. Okay, let me change my screen so you can see this. How do I capture this? Okay, wait, give me a second. I gotta make a new screen capture. Okay. I believe you can see it now. Okay. Oops. So take a look at this. This is turn 0. Also, shoutouts to Pang posing for the photo. It was very funny. He also let me take a picture because, you know, he played the turn and I was like, dude, you have to let me take a picture of this. This is so funny. Okay, so this was the turn 0. It was play, Essence of Ancestry Mind, Transcend, Transcend with the spec. Okay, yeah, that's what it was. So, Essence of Ancestry Mind plays the spec, so gets 2 Spectral Shields with a +1 counter. Essence of Ancestry Body Mind also gets a +1 counter. And then, with the chi that you get from the specialization, he plays the Mirror guy. And I was looking at this and I was like, dude, what do I do? It was a complete massacre. So in this game, another thing that's very important to notice, I'm not sure if you can see it in a picture actually, let me check. No, you can't. Another thing that's very important to notice is that, you know, very strong new players that are very skilled in the Enigma matchup are able to win. You know, I don't know how they do it. Spoiler, I'm not one of those players. But there is like some approach that they bring to the matchup or some choice of cards or play lines where they can actually fight Enigma on kind of even floor and they actually have a good chance of winning. You know, I have a very strong new player in my testing group that actually wins a lot of games against very strong Enigmas. Now, I was like, you know, arrogant as I am, competitive as I am, I was doing my preparation, I was thinking, okay, so it's a couple days before I'm traveling, I'll take like 3 days to play against my, you know, the best Enigma that I know, that I have access to, and I'm going to grind out this matchup and figure out what the strong new players have already figured out, and see how I win this matchup. So as I'm going through my preparation, it's day 1, I'm playing against Enigma, I'm getting crushed. It's day 2, I'm playing against It's day 3, I'm playing against Enigma, I'm getting crushed. And I was like, okay. I don't know what all these new players are doing, but I do not have the brains or the skills to figure out this matchup. I'm just going to sack it, basically. I was looking at my deck list, and I was a little scared of, like, wizards and stuff like that. Just, like, random niche matchups that I thought could get an advantage on me. And so I was just like, look, I'll just remove these 9 sideboard slots that I have for Enigma, and I'm going to make sure that I win the matchups that I actually know how to play. Because even with the 9 sideboard slots, I'm still losing to Enigma. This is not going to do me any favors. And so I remove Vambrace, I remove Looking for a Scrap, I remove Scar for Scar, I remove Enlightened Strike, I remove all of that. I think I end up putting like AB2 and Art of Desire Body, and then something else, which basically just let me... It was basically just to short up my Wizard and Aurora matchups. That's what I was looking to do. Yeah, so I sit next to Peng. He does the Insane turn 0. My deck is like not prepared to combat Enigma, but I still try my best. I think it's important, like, especially matchups like new Enigma are very technical. There's a lot of opportunities for the Enigma player to make a huge mistake, basically. And so you should play it out, and you should be like as focused as you can and play as hard as you can, because there is a chance that you can win. I end up going down to 4 life to clear the turn 0 board. And after that, I actually like hang on for a pretty long time. I think we play for... I go down to 4, I clear the entire board after like 4 turns of just grueling suffering. And I think after I go down to 4, we still play like another 6 turns. And I bring him down to like 22. But ultimately, like, the difference is just too big. He starts just throwing Phantasmaclasms at me and I die. So that's my first loss. It's round 4. At the end of round 4, I'm 3-1, which is pretty good. If you don't know how this stuff works, basically, if when you're trying to get into top 8, there's a tie in how many wins and losses you have with other people, the determining factor usually is when did you lose your first game. And winning the first 3 rounds in this scenario is pretty good, because It's just a really strong tiebreaker. It will get you in most of the time into top 8 if you're tied. So I was pretty stoked about that. You know, I wasn't stoked about fighting Enigma, but, you know, I removed all the cards from my sideboard. I knew what I was setting up for. I knew probably I was going to play Enigma, and I knew probably it was going to be unwinnable. And that's okay. It's just a decision I made. So, round 5. Round 5 was against Arachne Marionette. Now, earlier I told you how I didn't have a lot of preparation in this matchup. My hope was that the Arachne decks just wouldn't be that well built and well piloted yet, and that would be enough to get me over the edge. So this match was like probably the most interesting game that I played all day that day, aside from the one with Yasuda against Florian. That was also a very cool game. So I see in front of this person another Japanese player called Shannon, you know, the game starts and we're going through. I'm trying to figure out what Arachne Marionette wants to do into me. I think I sideboarded as if I was playing against an aggro deck, because I was under the impression that Arachne Marionette is pretty aggressive. And I start the game by taking the daggers, okay? So when you're playing against Assassin, a lot of times you'll be faced with this decision where the Assassin player swings a dagger to do something that you don't know what's coming next, but usually a lesson that you learn pretty quickly against Assassin, in my opinion, is that you shouldn't really be blocking daggers. Because, you know, they're swinging the dagger and then they're going to swing something that's a million times more annoying, and you wasted a card on the dagger that you would love to have for the next bit. And so I start by taking the daggers, as I do against Uzuri, as I do against Arachne, as I do against Nu most of the time. And I'm getting absolutely cooked. I'm getting smoked. Okay, my opponent's just like, dagger, I take the dagger, stealth card for 4, I block with 2 cards, they go over the top, they get to go again, they hit me with another stealth card. I'm just exploding. I'm taking so much damage all the time. But the good thing about Counter Blessings Nu is that I'm very comfortable in it, and also resolving all of the Counter Blessings is buying me a lot of time to understand how this matchup actually is supposed to work. And so eventually we get to this point where my opponent sends, I believe it was Bonds of Agony or something. I believe it was Bonds of Agony, and they flick, in order to turn the effect online, they flick the Mark Dagger, okay? So they only have 1 dagger now. You know, I have this line where I take some damage from the Bonds of Agony, but I'm able to empty out my entire hand using Counter Blessings. And after that point, I'm realizing, like, okay, my opponent is playing a lot of cards. We're actually even on life because Counter Blessings is so good. And we're kind of even, and my opponent is using a lot of cards, and they're missing a weapon now. And I'm also noticing that if my opponent doesn't have me marked, it's very hard for them to convert large hands, okay? And as Counter Blessings Nu, against some matchups, you have access to this game plan where if your opponent is unable to convert like 5 cards, you can kind of just like turtle them out, right? I told you before about how Counter Blessings Nu usually wants to play very aggressive, but against decks that have a hard time converting the hands, you can actually just like preserve your life, resolve your Counter Blessings, and let them try to figure out the 5-card hand that they have every single turn, and a lot of times they won't be able to do it. And so that's what I do. I start blocking the first dagger, and blocking a lot, preventing the first dagger to make sure that it's hard for the opponent to get go again, and just letting them like attack me. I'm just blocking. I'm trying to force them to have an insane hand every single turn, basically. And I start making back some tempo. My opponent starts stumbling a little bit. I start blocking the daggers, they play a stealth, they don't have reactions, they have 2 more stealths in hand, they pass turn. Goes back to me, I resolve a Counter Blessings. We do this back and forth for a while. And then, oh my god, dude. He plays this turn where it's like the double Savor the Bloodshed, and it hits and he like draws 2 cards. And I just get, you know, absolutely destroyed. I go down to like 4 health, and the game is looking like really, really, really bad. I'm thinking, okay, probably I'll lose this game. That's okay. I don't really know this matchup. I'll just have to win all the other matchups. It's okay. But then my opponent starts taking a lot of on-hits, presumably because, you know, as card quality is going down in the deck, as he's playing more of the deck, he's trying to keep the big threats alive. But my opponent is starting to take a lot of on hits, and I'm getting a lot of banishes from top of deck, from graveyard, and I'm collecting. Oh boy, I'm making. I have like 8 playable blues in their banish. Okay, and so not like insane blues, just little dinky attacks. And so we get into this end game where we're both insanely low, but I am new with 2 daggers and new activation every single turn, and they have the Mark Dagger plus the Stealth Dagger, okay? And so every turn I'm doing Dagger for Blue Dagger, activate new, play one of your blue cards, play another of your blue cards, and basically my opponent just can't keep up with this. It's too many like little bits of damage, they get really low, they have to start blocking, and I end up getting there in fatigue in like an insanely close and tense game where I basically had to learn the matchup on the fly. I think this is probably like in all the games of Flesh and Blood that I've played, this is probably one of my favorite, one of the ones where I think I played the best. Especially given the circumstances, because I just didn't know the matchup and I was able to learn it on the fly, which is something that I usually have a very hard time doing. So I was very proud of this win. And we're 4-1. Going into round 6, I'm playing against Katsu. It was my first time ever playing Nu against Katsu, but I just assumed it was going to be similar to playing against Zen, but not as insane. I also, even though I haven't played Nu Katsu specifically, I have a lot of experience against Katsu. I have a local Katsu player, and so I'm pretty comfortable. Well, not comfortable because it's always hard, but I have a lot of experience knowing how to block Katsu so that he doesn't just blow your head off. My opponent ended up playing like really aggressively, really early, like blowing all the equipment and just doing a lot of damage. I went down to 10 very early to just try and survive. I had to give up Mask. It was bad. The start of the game was very scary. My opponent was also playing these lines that I didn't really know, where they were using Mugenshi Release and cycling a bunch of cards back into the deck to try and not get fatigued. And I'm not used to playing against Katsu using these on hits, you know. I'm very used to playing the lines where you're trying to prevent Whelming Gust Wave, you're trying to play around Dishonored. Those are the lines that I'm more used to. But yeah, he was playing towards these Mugenshi lines where he was trying to recycle a bunch of cards. And that's actually where I ended up giving up Mask of Recurring Nightmares. It was to prevent one of these Mugenshi releases that would get like 3 Whelming Gust Waves back into the deck or something like that. And so, a big advantage that you have as Counter Blessings Nu in this matchup is that Counter Blessings allows you to you just never block the Kodashis, you just don't care. I'm taking all the Kodashis, I'm trying to block efficiently, I'm trying to survive. We get into an endgame where they have Kodashi, and I have blue daggers plus no activation, and that ends up being enough because, once again, like last game, I have a lot of random blues that I can play from my opponent, just from the back and forth of the game. And that ends up like getting me there. Like the extra 1 or 2 damage that you get off of your opponent's blues was enough that they got fatigued. And then we play round 7. And at this point, I'm pretty sure that I'm locked into top 8. So I'm 5-1, 5-2 is the cutoff, and I have probably like some of the best tiebreakers going into top 8. I play against Vespa, the eventual winner of the event, on Enigma. And the game was like... it was a pretty complicated game. Like, my opponent made a lot of mistakes, I felt. And they also said it, like, during the game. And we got into this weird situation where, like, we went to time, and I was clearly going to lose, but there was, like... I believe there was some advantage to me having a draw instead of a loss there. And so, for a while, I was thinking, like, am I supposed to concede here? Like, it's worse for me if I concede. But, you know, this game is, like, clearly lost. So I end up conceding because it seems like the correct thing to do, right? Like, I think if realistically you don't know the outcome of the game, it's fine if you don't concede. But, you know, if I'm being honest with myself, there was no way I'm winning that game. So I end up conceding. I also think I made some mistakes during this game. And this is one of the games that we're definitely reviewing. When we, you know, probably tomorrow we'll start reviewing the games from all the events that I missed. So yeah, we'll look at this round 7 game more in depth because it was on stream, and so we can take a look at it and just see, we can see it firsthand. And then we go into top 8, and I'm matched against Vespa, again, same player. And on my last two games against Enigma, I tried to not play Counter Blessings because, you know, my deck is based on another player's deck called Victor Mercado. And Victor had a game against Enigma on stream and he didn't bring Counter Blessings. So I was also like on the... no, wait, sorry, this is wrong. I was not bringing Counter Blessings because in my testing, Counter Blessings was being very bad. It was like when I need to clear the board, I was drawing the Counter Blessings and it was just a total liability. Sorry. So yeah, it was just a total liability in all the matchups that I was playing, and so I was not bringing it on the last two games. However, I get to this top 8 match, and I'm playing against Vespa again. I just got destroyed by him in round 7. I got destroyed by Peng also earlier, so I'm like, okay, fuck it. Let's try something different. Let's try to bring the Counter Blessings and see if that's better. So, I'm still, by the way, even after this game, I'm not sure which one is correct, if you're supposed to bring Counter Blessings or not. I'll have to test more and think more about it. I also, honestly, I don't remember this game as well, because at this point I've been playing Assassin for like 8 or 9 hours. I'm really, really tired. But I actually don't think I made that many mistakes. I think I played pretty tight. The first few turns, he was just Guardian gaming. You know how it is. It's CNC, it's Phantasmaclasm every single turn. I'm trying to block efficiently and trying to resolve my Counter Blessings, but you know, the onslaught is basically so much that I'm forced to pitch, I think, 2 codexes. And the problem with pitching codex is that if you're not seeing codex on your first cycle and Enigma hasn't played any auras, it means that there is almost definitely going to be a point in this game where the Enigma is going to set up a board and you're going to need to clear it, and codex is, you know, it can be a very good tool to clear the board, and you're just not going to have access to it. So yeah, I'm forced to pitch a few codexes. We get to a situation where, you know, like I said, they build a board, I'm able to take a lot of damage to clear it, and he's starting to run out of deck. And so I'm like, okay, maybe this Counter Blessings business is, maybe there's some logic here, because I'm actually like making progress towards fatiguing this Enigma. But then we get to the situation where I draw a really bad hand. I believe it was Venomous Bite, Venomous Bite, Venomous Bite, so 3 of those, not what you want to see, and then a Command and Conquer, and that's my hand. And yeah, then I believe on that same turn he sets up Mirror Guy plus Restless Coalescence, and that's kind of how he finishes the game. Like, he has a strong board, my hand is completely dysfunctional, and also I was really low, and I get to this point where I start also drawing my pitch deck, which, you know, I think I did pitch deck it fairly well. I think there were some good hands there, but I'm just at this point where I'm too low and I'm forced to block with the hands that I want to ideally play, and I just die. So my current philosophy on Nu versus Enigma, if you're on a Counter Blessings list, is that you have to adjust your win condition, and this is what I did. You know, obviously it didn't work for me. I lost all games I played against Enigma. But I was on, I think when you're against Enigma and you're on Counter Blessings, you just want to run them out of cards. That's your win condition. And if you're on Enigma and you don't have Counter Blessings, what you want to do is basically you want to do as much damage as soon as possible, so that they get to this low life total where they're unable to take damage to set up a board. Because that's a big problem with Enigma against Nu, in my opinion, is that you get into the situations where you're just... you know, you don't have disruption for a turn, let's say. Or even if you do, they're able to play around most of your disruption fairly well, if they're good at it. And so you get to the situations where you're presenting damage at Enigma, and Enigma in response is able to just like, okay, I take all the damage, and I set up this huge board, and as Nu, you have no way of knowing if this is happening before you've committed your turn, right? So you're unable to arsenal like... a good card to clear the board, stuff like that. And I think that makes it very hard. So what you want, if you're playing against Enigma and you don't have Counter Blessings, is you want to just do as much damage as you can early, so that they get into the spot where these decisions, where I'm just going to take all the damage to set up a board, are no longer possible, or at least they're very hard. And that was my journey in Battle Hardened Bangkok. I was pretty happy. with my results, especially given, you know, all the circumstances that I told you about where I didn't have access to the hunted cards, which I think I would have brought some of them. I didn't, you know, I wasn't really in a familiar place. I didn't know anyone. So, you know, I feel like sometimes it's good to have like your support system around when you're at these events to like keep your mental going strong. I didn't really have that. But I think I played well. I was very comfortable with my deck, and that went a long way. What else I want to mention here? Oh, I'm also happy because I think this is my best result so far. I've had another Battle Hardened top 8 in Battle Hardened Lisbon. That time I was on Enigma. But it was a smaller event. I believe Battle Hardened Lisbon was about 60 people. This event was about 90 people. I also got to play against a lot of people that I just didn't know, and that's very fun. I had a really fun time, like meeting all these people, chatting with them, knowing how they feel about the set, you know, playing games with them. Counter Blessings new as this like fun feature where all the games are usually a sweat. The games are always very long, and there's a lot of very interesting decisions, and I think the deck is very fun to play because of that. You'll just see a lot of very interesting situations basically every game. And yeah, that was my experience. I think now what we're going to do is I'm going to quickly go over the version of the deck that I took to this top 8. I think I'm going to make like a more thought out, how do I say this? A more thought out deck tech tomorrow, because I'm getting pretty tired today, but yeah, okay, so let's take a look at this. I believe this is what I took. Let me see if there's anything wrong here. Yeah, there is one thing wrong. That's fine. I'll just mention it as I'm showing you. Okay, so this is the list that I took to Battle Hardened Bangkok. A lot of things are pretty standard. This is based on the Victor Mercado new Counter Blessings list from, I believe, it was called in Kuala Lumpur. That's where they played it. But yeah, so let me go over some of the card choices. I believe that like this main board is pretty standard. You want 3 Command and Conquers. It's just, it's very good disruption. It has some very evil lines with Codex of Frailty. You want his Justinic and Venomous Bite to interact with Bonds of Agony. Well, his and Venomous Bite, you want them mostly because they interact with Bonds of Agony. And then Justinic is nice to have with Bonds of Agony, but it also has like one of the best 2-card hand plays with Prognosis, in my opinion. Like Prognosis Justinic is an insane 2-card hand. It will, like the swing that hand causes just wins a lot of games, or like sets the pace for a lot of games. Okay, and then we have let's talk about the, oh, actually, can I sort this a little different? Subtypes? Types? Okay, I think I like this more. Okay, so I was telling you about the attack reactions. We have Hiss, Justinic, Venomous Bite. They have their own role in the game. Siren's Call is actually part of the sideboard. I bring Siren's Call against decks that reasonably want to pitch a blue every turn. Think Florian's, Other News, Enigma, Zen. Siren's Call is very good into all of those decks. Something else about Siren's Call that I think is worth mentioning is that in a lot of matchups, in order to make your 60 card count, you'll be forced to choose between Siren's Call and Weakest Link as your last card, and neither of them is useful in the matchup. Well, not really useful in the matchup. And you know, you're forced to make this decision between, do I want to play Siren's Call against a deck that will like very rarely pitch a blue, stuff like Viserai, or do I want to bring Weakest Link because it's like a log, basically. It's a 2-for-6. And I'm leaning towards Siren's Call. This is actually the recommendation of someone from my testing team. I used to bring Weakest Link into these matchups because it's just damage. But Siren's Call, you know, sometimes you have like an extra pitch floating around and there's no like real opportunity costs to playing Siren's Call. And in that situation, and due to those situations, I'm starting to bring Siren's Call into these matchups where it's like dubious which one you want. But keep in mind, in these matchups, like against Viserai, this Siren's Call is blocking 9 out of 10 times. You don't want to resolve this card against Viserai, unless Viserai just like lets you resolve the card. Okay, so let's go into these actions. So Art of Desire Body is one of the cards that I included after I decided I was losing to Enigma. This card, you bring it for a few reasons. Originally, I was bringing this up. Okay, not me. Originally, new players were playing Art of Desire Body during Rosetta to deal with Aurora, I believe. It's just a card that, you know, on a turn where you're missing Disruption, this card is just good damage, it heals you, it gets a card out of their deck. Sometimes you're going to fatigue and all of this stuff is relevant. They're also like very red lines, so you also get to draw a card, which is good. It's just like a fine card. It's not insane, but it's a good role player. Now that the Hunted has dropped and there's some more Draconic decks coming out, this card has a lot more utility because there's a lot more decks where this effect is basically guaranteed to be live. And when this effect is live, this card is like pretty insane if you think about it. This is like a 0/4/4 that throws you a card. It's great. It's like Snatch. It's like Snatch that heals you and doesn't have a breakpoint. But also you can block it. Maybe it's not like Snatch at all. Anyway, Leave No Witness, it's just another Assassin staple. It's typically your best zero-cost target from Codex. It's also just Disruption. It gets cards out of their deck. It does everything that you want it to do. Weakest Link. Weakest Link is a card that a lot of new players have cut. I've realized. And the reason that I didn't cut it is because my mindset going into this event is like the matchups that I'm bad at or that I'm not favored into, I will just lose. Like it's okay. I will just lose against Enigma. This is fine. Now, what cannot happen, and what I would have been very upset if it happened, is if I played against like Zen, for example, and I lost that matchup. Like, I have a lot of practice against Zen. I want my deck to be very good against Zen, because it was the best deck going into the tournament, in my opinion. So bringing stuff like Weakest Link, I think is essential, because it's so good into Zen. It's like, it has some niche, well, not some niche, but sometimes it lines up really nicely into Aurora. I believe this card is like very important to include in your deck at the time that I made the decision. Now, with the shift of the meta since, you can maybe cut Weakest Link because Aurora and Zen have both dropped a bit in popularity. Codex of Frailty is the best card in the game. I don't think I have much to explain here. Let me see if I have some cute Codex technology. I don't really. Yeah, you're playing Codex mostly for 2 cards. You are doing Codex Leave No Witness, or you're doing Pitch a Blue to Dagger, Codex Command and Conquer. Okay, there is actually something interesting to talk about Codex here. Codex has the line with Command and Conquer that I just told you about. You pitch a blue into your dagger, you have one floating, you Codex, Command and Conquer, you use your Tunic to play the Command and Conquer. However, with Count Your Blessings, where is he? Okay, with Count Your Blessings, you actually have access to a new line where instead of swinging the dagger, you resolve Count Your Blessings. And I believe this is very relevant because if you're only playing a few daggers, as I am, you can see that I'm on Beckoning Mistblade and Scale Pillar, you will reach some situations where Scale Pillar isn't really doing anything anymore. Like your opponent's is out of armor. And Beckoning Mistblade isn't really like relevant if your idea is to do Beckoning Mistblade Command and Conquer, right? Beckoning Mistblade, Codex, Command and Conquer. And so, Count Your Blessings presents a new line that you can take, where rather than using your pitch on a dagger that isn't accomplishing anything, you're using your pitch on Count Your Blessings, which is accomplishing a lot. Okay, moving on to Art of Desire Mind. Again, this card is just... you need a certain number of 1 power blue stealths to synergize with Justinique and to also synergize with your Transcend and Mask. Art of Desire Mind, I think, is just one of the best candidates for that slot. If you're playing against Zen also, a lot of times this will draw you a card. Against Zen, it's actually like a pretty decent Justinique target, in my opinion. because you play this, you just unique. If it hits, you get 2 cards off the top. That might be 2 life, that might be 2 draws. Because you're playing Counter Blessings, those 2 draws might actually result in resolving a Counter Blessings for free. That's actually a line that I like a lot in this deck, is Art of Desire Mind with Counter Blessings in the arsenal. And the idea is, if this hits and you get the draw, there's a good chance that you get to resolve the Counter Blessings, and so you don't take an intellect penalty, even though you are playing Art of Desire Mind with a card in arsenal. Okay, next we have Bonds of Agony. Bonds of Agony, you know, this is a card that your opponent's face drops every time that you play it. You usually want to pair it with one of these guys. I like, I've tended towards lately, the boots are just my Bonds of Agony button most of the time. Like, when I want to play Bonds of Agony, I block with the boots, and I get 2 reactions out of here. And if you already have 2 reactions, that means that all of these guys are enough to get Bonds of Agony live. Another interesting, you know, this is like very detail, it's a very small thing, but I think it's interesting, is that Counter Blessings makes it so that if you have Bonds of Agony, Undertow Stiletto, Counter Blessings, just a Nick, and a blue, what you get to do is you get to play Bonds of Agony with 3 cards in hand, I believe. Your opponent is incentivized to either play around it or give up on blocking it. And either way, you're fine. So if the opponent decides that they're giving up on it, you hit them with just a Nick, boots, Counter Blessings, and they explode. If your opponent decides that they're going to try and block it, and they've blocked it enough that just a Nick won't hit, you get to just resolve your Counter Blessings. This guy goes in the arsenal, and you're happy. I think a lot of the challenge of, well, not a challenge, but something that you have to adjust if you want to try Counter Blessings new and you're used to regular new, is like, what are the lines where I can play Counter Blessings most efficiently? Because that's what will decide a lot of games. I was telling you before, this card, if you resolve it on its own, it's pretty mid. It's good when you are able to resolve it very efficiently and very powerfully. And that means knowing these lines that I'm telling you about with, like, you know, Bonds of Agony, equipment, Counter Blessings, just a Nick. It also goes through managing your tunic carefully so that you have 4 pitch. 4 pitch is very good for this deck because it allows you to play one of your 2-cost disruptions or one of your daggers and also resolve Counter Blessings, which is pretty relevant. Now, where were we? Bonds of Attraction and Bonds of Memory. Okay, so Bonds of Attraction, Bonds of Memory. You can think about these two as like a package, basically. The idea of these cards is that they're filling in for the blue... What's her face? Blue Stealth 1 power cards. They are just unique targets. They work with your mask, like I said before. The reason that we bring these guys is because they have a slight upside. So, against decks with playable blues, you can think like Zen, Viserai in some versions. There's this hidden cost for the opponent to take this card, which is, if you're a more starting new player, you may be tempted to play this card and resolve it for the life gain, which is totally valid. Like, there's good reasons to do that. However, if you're in these matchups where they have playable blues, I believe that what you should do when these cards hit is you should banish something that you can play in the end of the game. So, for example, when you're playing against Zen, I think if you have the option to banish a 100 wins, a blue 100 wins, or a blue Ancestral Harmony, you should do that basically every time. Because with Counter Blessings new, you will get into these very grueling endgames. If you'll remember what I was just saying about like my run at the Battle Hardened, I had 2 games that were decided by what blues I was able to play from my opponent. because playing your opponent's blues at the end of the game skews the card count in your favor. What do I mean by that? When you get to these end games, both of you will be probably like swinging weapons at each other because you're trying not to lose cards out of deck. And if you're swinging your blue daggers and your hand is full of chi, you can play a lot of your opponent's blues to make up like any disadvantage that you have in card count, any disadvantage that you have in life total, any disadvantage that you have in yeah, it's those two. So playing your opponent's blues at the end of the game lets you make up differences in card count and life total. Oh, and weapon quality. Because, you know, if you're playing against a hammer and you're playing your dinky little daggers, that's usually not enough to get you there. But if you're playing your little daggers and you're following it up with blue attacks, that's actually as good or better than the hammer. So you need to use these on hits from these two cards to make sure that your endgame is like, you have some insurance at the end of the game. You shouldn't use this to like just get life unless the situation is very dire, in my opinion. Double Trouble. This card is just another blue stealth 1 power that is hard for your opponent to justify blocking, but a lot of times not blocking this is what will lose them the game. So you can, you know, if we're also mentioning Counter Blessings lines again, you have lines like Double Trouble, Hiss, or Venomous Bite, either one of them, plus some blue and Counter Blessings. What this allows you to do is you hit them with the Double Trouble Mystic Attack reaction that counts for 2. Double Trouble effect is live, and you also resolve Counter Blessings. This is very efficient. It's pretty good numbers for, you know, Assassin, which is not usually a numbers deck. Levels of Enlightenment is here because this card is, I think, simply too strong to not include. I don't think it particularly, like, I'm not going to tell you about some insane synergy that this card has, because you might be like, oh, this costs 1, doesn't it work well with Counter Blessings? It doesn't really, actually, because, you know, if your turn is pitch blue to play levels for 5 plus Counter Blessings, I guess that's okay. I don't usually go for this line. But I believe that a much better use of levels of Enlightenment usually is Blue Dagger levels of Enlightenment, because your opponent should not be blocking Blue Daggers. And so I think there are some lines where you will, for example, Blue Dagger levels of Enlightenment with draw card and 4 go again, draw card, and you will draw like some blue card that you can use to pitch to a Counter Blessings, and everything works out nicely. But I don't believe that those lines are very reliable, and I don't believe those lines are very good unless you have it pitch stacked and you know exactly what's coming up. So I believe Levels of Enlightenment, you want to include it mostly for this like blue dagger line. It gives your opponent a reason to worry about the blue dagger. It's very like, this line I think is insanely above rate if you do the math on it. It's a 2 card 5 that draws you a card, which is, you know, it's not bad, it's pretty good. So yeah, that's why we include Levels of Enlightenment. It's just kind of raw, the raw power of this card. It's also a blue that blocks for 3. This card just, it's everything. This card does everything. Okay, Persuasive Prognosis. Another one of the 1 power stealth blues. This one is actually just like insanely good. This on it is very relevant. It heals you like a bunch sometimes. Ideally, you want to be pairing this with Justinic. But even just like if your opponent is out of armor and you've been pitching this card the whole game, like saying this for 1 at the end of the game when your opponent is forced to give you a card is like, it's very powerful. And then we have Surgical Extraction. Surgical Extraction has a kind of a similar role to Levels, but rather than the upside being the raw value, it's this insane on-hit. Surgical Extraction a lot of times will get a defense reaction out of your opponent. It's also a great card to pair with Venomous Bite, in my opinion. Like, these two are a very strong 2-piece. It's also very easy to just keep pitching this card and keep sending it back into the deck, and then at the end of the game, when you play this for 4, your opponent doesn't have armor, they're going to be like, it's going to be insanely disruptive to them. It also has the marginal benefit of banishing a card from the top of deck, helping your card count troubles when if you end up in a fatigue endgame. Okay, these guys I've talked about. I just want to talk a bit more about Silence Call. Silence Call here is mostly, I believe, in the meta that I played in, this card is mostly here to make Zen players really sad. This is one of the most effective disruption pieces against Zen. They can't interact with it. They don't have an easy way to get rid of the blues in their hand like Enigma does. So this card is just very effective in that scenario. Another very important thing is, again, counter blessings lines. So consider this. Art of Desire Mind, you play it, and then you put Silence Call on top of this. If you get a blue action card, where is she? If you get a blue action card, Nu is going to banish the blue action card that you force to block here. So you will draw one card from Silence Call, one card from Art of Desire Mind. If this hand is complemented with one Counter Blessings that you already have in hand, it is guaranteed that you'll be able to resolve these Counter Blessings with the draws that you get out of Silence Call plus Art of Desire Mind. This is one of the lines that I like the most out of these two cards because, Silence Call is already by itself an insanely disruptive card, and the idea that you can pair it with this and you get another draw and one more life is crazy, in my opinion. This is a very powerful line. Now, let's talk about the defense reactions. Fate Foreseen, Sink Below, these are just like good value cards. Assassins sometimes struggle a bit with just like being on rate. And so I like playing the defense reactions. Well, first of all, because they're defense reactions, there's a lot of applications when it comes to like preventing on it, blocking efficiently, all of that stuff, yada yada. But also, these are just like 0/4, so there are cards that help you keep up with your opponent in value in a deck that a lot of times doesn't have great value. Now, Frailty Trap. This is not what I actually brought. What I actually ended up bringing was That All You Got. And That All You Got, the applications that I found for it are Syndra Daggers, Arachne Daggers, and this is something new that I found out, which I'm not sure if it's good yet. But you can play this into Enigma and put it in front of the +2 Spectral Shield to preserve life. I don't know if this is good yet, so don't take this super seriously, but I believe this might be a relevant line when you are when you're playing Counter Blessings against Enigma and you're trying to fatigue them. I think having access to this 3 block that draws you a card might be a good idea. Typically against Enigma you don't want to bring any defense reactions, you want to have the highest chance possible of drawing something that clears the board state every turn, and so you don't bring defense reactions. But I believe this might play a key role in that it lets you preserve some life, which is very hard against Enigma, and not lose offensive power because you're drawing the card back. Okay, now let's get into equipment. We have Arcane Lantern. This is what you bring against the Rune Blades, is just Arcane Lantern. And then we have Widowback Abdomen, which you bring against the Wizards. The reason that I bring this is because I saw someone else do it. Sorry, I don't have very intelligent, eloquent evaluation here of which equipments are worth more or less. I saw that the new players, this is the second AB piece that I like bringing, so I brought it as well. Then we have Arousing Wave, Undertow Stilettos. These cards are nothing new. These are probably the best common equipment ever printed. These cards are absolutely insane. You use this one to turn on Bonds of Agony, and this one, you will either use it to turn on another Bonds of Agony, or to put a breakpoint on a CNC, Weakest Link, those kind of guys. Tunic is insane, right? I told you a lot about how these 4 pitch lines are very important for the deck. They help you resolve your counter blessing smoothly. Tunic is it's everything. I cannot imagine playing this deck without Tunic. Now, the counter blessings. I've already been telling you a lot about them, but I'm wondering if there's anything else that you need to know about counter blessings specifically. And I guess what I would go into is, if you pick up this deck, you will need to learn... let me think about how to phrase this properly. when you're playing Counter Blessings new, you need to be very aware of how many Counter Blessings you've played, where the Counter Blessings are, the ones that you haven't played yet. So did you pitch some of them for second cycle, all of that stuff. And you need to get a feel for how much health you have left actually, because sometimes your life counter is going to say like 6 life, but you actually have like 18. And that's very important to know, and because you will need to make a lot of decisions during your games based on how much life you're still going to gain, and based on when you're likely to gain that life. I would also say a skill that is pretty important for this game that I'm not very good at yet is knowing... okay, consider this situation. You are in the middle of the game and you are very low, okay? You're starting to run out of life. Your opponent is attacking you, and you have a hand that is very good. That is very good offensively. You really want to play this hand, not block with it. It is very important in this situation that you are aware exactly of how many counter blessings are left in first cycle. Okay, so if I take this damage, how long will it take until I'm able to heal it back up? And also, how many turns are left in first cycle? I think this is something that is very important for you to track. I'm not very good at this yet. I think it's one of the things that I need to improve. But it is very important for you to know, like, okay, I have 1 red counter blessings left in my first cycle. It's going to heal me for, like, let's say, 7, okay? How long do I have to wait until this card guaranteed shows up? That is very important to know and to keep track of. So you need to track the turn count and also how many cards you presented so that you know when this card is showing up. What else do I want to tell you about? Oh, something else that you need to know when you're playing this deck is you need to be aware of, for each matchup, if you can afford to pitch the counter blessings. Because I'm not going to lie to you. Like, these cards, basically every game you will have a turn where you draw one of these and it's the worst thing in the world. You really didn't want to see it now. And you need to be very conscious based on game state and based on matchup whether you can afford to pitch it. And that's something that you will just learn with like time and practice. There's no like, I can't give you a easy cheat code for this. If I had to give you like a rule of thumb that you can follow at the start, I really want to emphasize that like you need to learn this for yourself and be like very familiar and comfortable with each situation that you find yourself in. My rule of thumb would be against aggro decks, you need to resolve all 6 on the first cycle. And a lot of times you're not going to want to do it. It's going to be very like inefficient and it's going to feel very bad. But I genuinely believe that against a lot of aggro decks, the best chance that you have at winning comes from resolving all 6 of these in the first cycle. Okay, now let's go into the Transcend cards. We have Homage, Passover, Path Well Traveled, Rising Sun, Setting Moon, Grain that tips the scales. I think all of these are very standard, like these 5. Everyone plays them, pretty much. The idea of the Transcends is that the first cycle, you want to pair these with blue cards, activate Mask, pitch them back into the deck. Second cycle, these are going to be, hopefully, a few of them are going to be flipped, and you're either going to use that to activate Mask a bunch more times, or you're going to use that to activate New and start cashing in all the cards that you've banished throughout the game. Now, I want to bring your attention to 2 of these. First, we have Sacred Art Undercurrent Desires. This card, I don't like. I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't really like this card. I think you should bring it if you assess that in your local meta, this card, you are going to have a lot of playable blues. So, for example, against Florian, this card is a house. This card is going to do like 10 damage. Very strong. Against someone like Zen, I'm not as sure if you want to bring it. I just don't know yet. Like, this card can represent a lot of damage, but it's also very clunky. It takes a lot to play this card. Another great reason to play this card is if you're playing against... I call them the Reckless Guardian. The Reckless Guardian is the Guardian deck that brings playable blues for Nu. Which is a dying breed, I believe. If you see, for example, Jarl lists nowadays, they don't bring a lot of good blues. They will give you like a lot of trash ones for you to like mess around with. But yeah, this card, if your opponent has playable blues, can be game winning. If your opponent doesn't have playable blues, it's Personally, I'm not sure if this card is going to make it in the new meta, but we'll have to see. It's definitely something that you need to like think about and consider for your local meta. It's very matchup dependent, this one. And finally, I want to talk about Preserved Tradition, which is the... this is a single card, but it is the card that I am most proud of including in the deck. Most new players currently are playing Stir the Pot in this slot. And I really, really, really don't like Stir the Pot in Counter Blessings. For a few reasons. A lot of reasons, actually. So I was just telling you about how when you're playing Counter Blessings, it's extremely important that you track where your Counter Blessings are, how many turns are left until you see the next one, because you will need to make decisions based on this. If you're playing Stir the Pot, all of this goes out the window, because if you resolve Stir the Pot, you're going to shuffle your deck, it's going to be a whole mess. I believe for Counter Blessings new, it's really, really important for you to be aware of your second cycle, be aware of what's left in your first cycle. You need to track all of this stuff to improve your chances at winning. So, and that's why I don't like Stir the Pot. Now, in regards with Preserved Tradition especially, this card, in my opinion, is absolutely insane in new. It's so hard for me to understand how people don't play this card. Preserved Edition, what it says, basically, is you have a fourth copy of Codex of Frailty. Most of the time, that's what the card is going to say. Codex of Frailty, in my opinion, is the best card in the game, or like top 2 best cards in the game. And having something that allows you to resolve a fourth one will win you like so many games. Like, there's so many games with this deck that I win because I preserve Tradition, a Codex of Frailty into the bottom of the deck, and then we reach second cycle, and my opponent is like has to deal with like 2 or 3 codexes that I pitch decked, and it's just completely backbreaking, and they end up losing like a million cards to this card. So yeah, Preserved Tradition, extremely powerful. I like it a lot. If you want, the more democratic vote here is that most players are playing Stir the Pot in this slot. So if you don't like Preserved Edition, you should consider Stir the Pot. Oh, I should also tell you why people play Stir the Pot. So, I've been trashing the card, but there is good reasons to play it. The good reasons to play it is that if you flipped a couple of chi with Stir the if you flipped a couple chi and you've pitched them and you play Stir the Pot, you're going to see these statistically. You're going to see these chi earlier than if you hadn't. Also, if you are forced into a very bad, if you're forced into a very complicated situation where you have to pitch some of your Counter Blessings, for example, and then you Stir the Pot, that can bail you out. So, given all these advantages, why don't I like Stir the Pot? Because everything that I just told you in regards with the advantages of Stir the Pots was full of ifs and maybes and sometimes, and I prefer having this card, which is guaranteed another bomb at the end of the game, basically, than Stir the Pot, which is a card that is only there, in my opinion, to either short up your mistakes or take advantage of a lucky order of cards. Because if you draw Stir the Pot as your first chi in like the middle of the game, I just don't like it at all. But yeah, I think that's all I want to tell you about this deck. I've been having a lot of fun playing this deck. Like, you should realize, okay, final disclaimer. We might put this at the start of the video, actually. If you're playing Counter Blessings new, you have to be extremely aware that a lot of people don't like fighting this deck. Like, a lot of people don't like fighting new, and a lot of people don't like fighting Counter Blessings. So you're basically, you're forcing your opponent to play a game that, by default, they're not happy playing. And I think there's kind of like a social contract that you're signing, where as the Counter Blessings new player, I feel like it's... it sounds like you're babysitting your opponent. That's not what I mean. You kind of have a responsibility to like be pleasant, play quickly, communicate clearly with your opponent everything that's happening, because you'll need to be playing very fast. And it's very important if you pick up this deck that you have all of these things in mind. I think if you play this deck and like you go to time you go to time 3 rounds in a row in your RTN and your opponent doesn't concede, and you're like, oh, my opponent was an asshole for not conceding when I was going to win the game. Like, this isn't a deck for you. You need to play this deck, like, you need to be very fast. You need to be comfortable with telling your opponent, look, you need to play faster. there's a kind of a social contract that comes with playing Counter Blessings new, in my opinion. Also, something else that you should be wary of when you're playing this deck is that this is a very fatiguing deck. Haha, fatiguing, because it wins in fatigue sometimes. No, what I mean is that you will be playing very long rounds. You will be making a lot of lines are not obvious. You will need to go through and think a lot about some situations. And you also will need to play quickly. So this is a lot of like stuff that makes it harder to play the deck in a competitive setting, in my opinion. And it is the reason why I considered, after the Battle Hardened, I was like, maybe I just don't play this deck competitively again. Because I think over the course of the Battle Hardened, in total, I had 6 minutes to rest between rounds. Because that's how frequently I was going to time, or like almost going to time. And yeah, so I think these are some things that you need to be aware of when you pick up this deck. But it's not all doom and gloom. I think this deck, for me at least, was like it has improved my gameplay immensely. I think it has improved my pitch stacking a lot because you're basically guaranteed to go to second cycle every game if you choose to play that way. You have a lot of tools and a lot of relevant things to pitch stack that will, like, there's a lot of reward to be gained in pitch stacking carefully. And also, this deck has taught me a lot about how to approach matchups, how different matchups need different approaches, how, like, game plans are, like, so insanely important for this deck. Like, understanding when you need to resolve your counter blessings against each individual deck, understanding how to disrupt each deck in the meta most effectively. All of this stuff is like extremely important for this deck, and I think if you play this deck for a long time and you are trying to find success with this deck and you're really committed to it, you will just inevitably have to learn all of the stuff that I'm telling you about, which I think are some of the more advanced concepts in the game that you won't learn you won't naturally learn playing a lot of decks in the game. So, for example, if you're playing like an aggressive deck, let's say, I don't know, Aurora, there's some stuff that you could really some of this stuff that I just described, you can really benefit from knowing it and learning it, but Aurora and matches you'll play with Aurora will not naturally teach you this stuff. I feel like when you play Counter Blessings new, you just have to learn this stuff for the deck to function well. If you just like, if you play Counter Blessings new, and your scope of the game is limited to the hand that you have right in front of you, you will not do well. You need to like have a lot of macro planning. You need to think about what stuff is coming up, what stuff you have to deal with, what stuff is there left to deal with. It will force you to look at the game in a way that is very different and is very, very interesting, in my opinion. I've had a lot of fun playing this deck. I've learned a lot. I think it's a great deck if you're like an intermediate player and you're trying to get you're trying to improve these like more niche aspects of the game, I guess. And yeah, I think that's it. I'm going to call it here. I think my voice is kind of going. I'm going to go make some lunch. And yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Bye bye.